when you look at the world, just the simple act of perception, right? Just looking at something, hearing something. You're not just looking at that object or that person. You're also looking at what's on your mind. What that means is that there's never really something that is pure in perception. It's always filtered through the content of your mind. For example, empiricists, right, used to argue that when you perceive something, it's simply just stimulants coming from the outside, traveling, through your senses, and you perceive that, right? They have a very simple-minded approach to perceptions, to perceiving something, right? But Kant argued that his argument against empiricism is that it's not just that, right? In his critique of pure reason, he argued that the content of your mind has everything to do with how you perceive something, right? So what that means is that when you look at an object or a person, you're not just looking at that object. You're not understanding the object in and of themselves. You're looking at that object through your mind as well. What that means is that, okay, let me give you an example. Say that I grew up in this building right here, right? And I'm not only looking at everybody will have a different will perceive this building differently, right? If you look at this building for the first time versus me, who grew up in this building and looking at it for the thousandth time, we're gonna have a very different conception of what this building is about, right? If you're an architect, you're gonna have a very different conception of what this building is about. If you're a movie director, you'd be like, okay, can I shoot in this building? Blah blah blah. So each person, when they look at the same object, because the content of their minds are different, they can be looking at very different things, right? Because perception isn't just the act of stimulants coming into our senses. It's not like that. It's a two-way street. Stuff comes in, stuff goes out constantly in a cycle. So what that means is that the more aesthetic and the more enriched the content of your mind is, the more interesting this world is. The more enriched this world is. The more awesome, the more aesthetic this world is to you. Depressed people are the people who have nothing in their minds, right? They look at the world and they see emptiness. They see bleak. They see they don't see anything because there's nothing on their mind for them to reflect back on, right? And when they see the world, they see the emptiness of themselves. And when that happens, they become depressed and meaningless. And I think I'm the opposite of that. I used to be depressed a lot. Then I started looking at the world differently. I started reading books. I started acquiring an aesthetic mind, acquiring an enriched mental space, and I stopped being depressed. Why? Because I'm able to use whatever aesthetics, whatever content of my mind to project out into the world. So nothing that I perceive is empty. Everything is interesting. Everything can be beautiful, right? So next time when you're bored with yourself, think about why you're bored. I'm never really bored in my life. There's always something to think about, something to admire, right? Next time when you look at a person and see whatever you don't like about that person, examine yourself also. Of course, that person has something to do with however you're perceiving them to be and your emotion towards that person. But at the same time, what people don't realize is that a big chunk of that emotion, a big chunk of that mode of perception, or the how you think about that person, is that way because of the way you are, because of the way your mind is, right? So, it's hard. Sometimes the stuff in the world you can't do anything about, right? If you look at a person and you see something that you don't like about him, if you see this really ugly building, that you can't really do anything to change that. But what you can change is the content of your mind. And if you can just build up that internal aspect of perception, then things are going to be a lot more interesting. Let me give you an example. When a cat hears Justin Bieber's music, it hears nothing but noise. Why? Because the structure of its brain isn't advanced enough to perceive that as pleasurable sounds. It's the same reason why most people don't listen to classical music. Because literally, it goes over their heads. They can't appreciate classical music. Not that there's anything wrong with classical music. It's the most complex art form in the universe, almost. It's the most abstract, the most beautiful. It's gonna continue to exist for another thousands of years. The reason why people don't listen to classical music is that the structure of their brains just aren't advanced enough to appreciate. I'm sorry this sounds pretentious, but it's